They fired me while I was on maternity leave. But what happened next made national news. I was holding my 3-day-old daughter Emma when my phone buzzed. Still exhausted from 36 hours of labor, I almost ignored it. But something made me check. Maybe mother's instinct, maybe just bad timing. The email was from Meredith in HR. No congratulations or hope you're recovering well, just a cold, corporate template with my name inserted. Dear Aubrey, due to ongoing restructuring initiatives, your position as Senior Data Analyst has been permanently dissolved. Your employment with Techno Solutions is terminated effective immediately. Please contact HR to discuss final paperwork and benefit transitions. I read it 3 times, my hands shaking. This couldn't be real. I'd worked at Techno Solutions for 5 years. I'd just gotten promoted 6 months ago. My job was supposed to be protected by law while I was on maternity leave. Emma started crying and I realized I was crying too. Caleb. I called to my husband who was making breakfast downstairs. Caleb, get up here now. When he read the email, his face went white. They can't do this, he said. This is illegal. But as I stared at that cold, heartless message, I realized that legal or not, they'd just destroyed my career while I was recovering from childbirth. They had no idea what they'd just started. Caleb paced our bedroom like a caged animal while I tried to nurse Emma with shaking hands. We need to call someone, he said. A lawyer, the labor board, somebody. This is discrimination. With what money? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. You know we were counting on my salary, the mortgage, the car payments, Emma's college fund. My mind was spinning. 5 years of 60-hour weeks, missed dinners and weekend calls. 5 years of proving myself in a male-dominated company. 5 years of being told I was essential and irreplaceable. All erased with one email. I opened my laptop and tried to log into my work account, but as expected, it was already disabled. They'd moved fast. But then I remembered something. I had my personal phone, and I'd been forwarding work emails there during my pregnancy for convenience. I scrolled through my personal email and found the thread I was looking for. 3 days ago, the day Emma was born, Trent had accidentally included me on an email chain with executives. It was supposed to go to a different Aubrey in accounting, but he'd selected the wrong name. The subject line made my blood run cold. A. Thompson replacement, urgent. I clicked on it, and what I read made me sick. Now that Aubrey's out on leave, we can finally move forward with the restructuring. I never thought she'd be as committed after having a baby anyway. Working mothers are dead weight. Dead weight. While I was in labor, my boss was calling me dead weight. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was what I found next. I scrolled through more forwarded emails, my anger growing with each message. But then Emma started crying again, and suddenly I couldn't breathe. My chest felt tight, my hands were shaking, and I felt like the walls were closing in. Aubrey? Caleb found me hyperventilating in the nursery. Hey, look at me. Breathe with me. This was the 3rd panic attack since Emma's birth. The combination of hormones, sleep deprivation, and now job loss was destroying me mentally. I can't do this, I sobbed. I can't fight them. I can barely take care of Emma. You need to see someone, Caleb said gently. This isn't just about the job anymore. But therapy costs money we didn't have. My health insurance ended with my termination, and Cobra would cost us $1,800 a month. Money we couldn't afford. We'll figure it out, Caleb said, but I could see the stress in his eyes too. Maybe my company's employee assistance program. That evening, while Emma slept fitfully, she'd been fussy since my milk supply dropped from stress, I forced myself to keep documenting. One email from Trent to the CEO made me gasp. Aubrey will probably want to go part-time or quit anyway. Most women do after babies. Better to cut ties now before she becomes a liability. Another message showed they'd already hired my replacement, a 25-year-old guy named Brad, who would be making $20,000 more than my salary. They planned this, I whispered to Caleb. While I was pregnant, they were planning to replace me. But when Emma woke up crying again at 2 a.m., and I realized I was crying too, I wondered if I was strong enough to fight back. The next morning, I called Evelyn Crawford, an employment lawyer I'd found online who specialized in pregnancy discrimination. Her reviews were incredible, but more importantly, she offered free consultations. Mrs. Thompson, Evelyn said after I explained the situation, What you're describing is textbook violation of the Pregnancy Discrimination Act. The fact that they accidentally sent you these emails is, well, it's incredibly lucky for your case. So you think we have a case? I think we have a strong case, but I need to see all the evidence you've collected, and we need to follow proper legal procedures. I spent the next hour forwarding emails, screenshots, and performance reviews. Evelyn called back within 2 hours. Aubrey, this is one of the clearest cases I've seen in 15 years. But we need to file with the EEOC first. That's required before we can sue. The EEOC? Equal Employment Opportunity Commission. Federal law requires filing a complaint there within 300 days of discrimination. We'll file immediately. How long does that take? EEOC will investigate, which usually takes 6 to 8 months. Then they'll issue a right to sue letter, and we can file in federal court. 6 to 8 months felt like forever when we had bills to pay and a baby to support. But there's good news, Evelyn continued. Companies often settle during the EEOC process to avoid public trials. And I work on contingency. You don't pay unless we win. That afternoon we filed the EEOC complaint. The legal wheels were finally turning, but the real battle was just beginning. 3 weeks into our EEOC case, the financial reality was crushing us. Caleb had picked up weekend shifts, but his salary alone couldn't cover our mortgage, car payments, and Emma's expenses. I'd started looking at job listings at coffee shops and retail stores, anything to bring in money. Maybe we should just take whatever settlement they offer, Caleb said during one of our increasingly frequent money arguments. This legal fight could take years. So I should just give up? I snapped, exhaustion making me sharp. Let them get away with destroying my career? I'm not saying give up, I'm saying we're drowning financially. The COBRA payment is due tomorrow, and we don't have the money. Emma started crying from her bouncy seat, probably picking up on our stress. I picked her up, but she was fussy. My milk supply had dropped again due to anxiety. That's when Lexi Martin called. She was an investigative journalist for the National Women's Rights Network, and her voice crackled with energy through the phone. I've been tracking patterns of pregnancy discrimination in tech companies, she explained. Your case caught my attention because Techno Solutions has been on my radar for months. Your radar? I've received tips from 3 other women about similar situations there, but none of them were willing to go public. You could be the key to exposing a pattern. After explaining about potential payment for exclusive stories, Caleb and I looked at each other. The money wasn't much, but it could buy us another month of health insurance. There's a risk, I told Lexi. Going public could make them fight harder. Or it could bring in other victims who strengthen your case, she replied. That night, Emma finally fell asleep after hours of fussing. Caleb and I sat at our kitchen table, calculator between us, trying to figure out how to survive another month. Maybe this story could help other women, I said finally. Or maybe it could save our house, Caleb replied quietly. 4 months into our EEOC case, with legal bills mounting and my savings account dwindling, Lexi called with a proposition that would change everything. Aubrey, I want to write about your case for the National Women's Rights Network, but I need you to go on the record. I hesitated. Going public meant no more privacy, no more quiet legal battle. It meant opening our family up to scrutiny and potential backlash. What kind of story are we talking about? The kind that makes companies think twice before discriminating against pregnant women, Lexi said. The kind that protects other mothers from going through what you're experiencing. The financial pressure was becoming overwhelming. Caleb's salary alone wasn't enough to cover our mortgage, car payments, and Emma's expenses. I'd been considering taking a job at a coffee shop just to make ends meet. There's something else, Lexi added. The network pays for exclusive stories like this. Not a lot, but enough to help with expenses while your case moves through the courts. The money wasn't the main reason I said yes, but it helped. More importantly, I'd been hearing from other women through social media, women who'd faced similar discrimination, but were too scared to fight back. If I do this, will it hurt our legal case? Actually, it might help, Evelyn had advised. Public pressure sometimes pushes companies towards settlement. That evening, while Emma slept and Caleb worked late to earn overtime pay, I made the decision that would transform our quiet legal battle into a national story. Let's do it, I told Lexi. I had no idea what I'd just unleashed. The positive response to the article was overwhelming, but so was the backlash. By the second day, the trolls had found me. Lying feminist trying to get rich off fake discrimination, read one comment on the article. Probably a terrible employee who deserved to be fired. Women who have babies shouldn't expect to keep their jobs, wrote another. Stay home where you belong. The worst ones came directly to my social media, anonymous accounts calling me a greedy bitch and worse. One message made my blood run cold. We know where you live. Watch your back. I'm deleting your Facebook account, Caleb said after finding me crying over my laptop. This is getting dangerous. But what about the supportive messages? The women who need help? They can contact the foundation later. Right now, I'm worried about our safety. Meanwhile, the legitimate support was incredible. Danny had kept detailed notes about what she'd witnessed at Techno Solutions, including emails and meeting recordings. There's Jessica, who was moved to a closet-sized office after announcing her pregnancy, Danny explained during our video call while I tried to keep Emma quiet in the background. Sarah, who was suddenly deemed not leadership material after having her first baby. And Michelle, who was forced to resign after they kept scheduling critical meetings during her pumping times. They forced women to quit? It was more subtle than firing. They'd make their lives miserable until they quit on their own. You're the first one they were stupid enough to fire outright. But focusing on the case was hard when Emma was going through sleep regression. She'd wake up every hour, and I was so exhausted I could barely think straight. I can't do interviews like this, I told Caleb after falling asleep during a phone call with Evelyn. I'm a mess. Maybe my mom could come help for a few days, he suggested. We need to talk about getting you some real help. The irony wasn't lost on me. I was fighting for working mothers' rights while barely surviving as a new mother myself. The Channel 7 interview aired on Friday night, and by Saturday morning, every major news outlet was calling. CNN, Fox News, The Today Show, Good Morning America, everyone wanted to tell our story. This is insane, Caleb said, scrolling through interview requests on my phone. Ellen DeGeneres' People Just Called. But Techno Solutions' response was swift and sophisticated. Within hours of the story breaking, they released a carefully crafted statement. Techno Solutions is committed to equal employment opportunities and follows all applicable laws. Ms. Thompson's position was eliminated as part of a broader restructuring that affected multiple departments. We deny any allegations of discrimination and will vigorously defend against these baseless claims. Their legal team immediately filed motions to dismiss our EEOC complaint, arguing that the emails were taken out of context and that my termination was purely business-related. They're good, Evelyn admitted during our phone call. They've hired Morrison and Associates, one of the top employment defense firms in the country. They're not going to make this easy. The media attention was a double-edged sword. While it brought public support, it also made Techno Solutions dig in their heels. Their stock price dropped only slightly. Investors seemed to believe their version of events. But then I got a call from someone unexpected that changed everything. Ms. Thompson? This is Danny Martinez. I used to work at Techno Solutions, and I think I have information you need to hear. The conversation that followed would blow their defense wide open. Monday morning brought chaos to Techno Solutions, but it also brought an unexpected call to my personal phone. Aubrey? It's Lisa from accounting. Lisa had been my work friend for 3 years. I'm calling from my car. I can't be seen talking to you. Some people here support you, but they're scared. Trent sent an email saying, anyone who talks to media about you will be fired for violating confidentiality agreements. My heart sank. What about the other women who were discriminated against? Jessica left the company last month. She's too scared to come forward. Sarah signed a non-disclosure agreement when they demoted her. Everyone's terrified. After Lisa hung up, I felt more alone than ever. The people who could corroborate my story were being silenced by fear. But the isolation got worse when Emma started running a fever. Without health insurance, a simple pediatrician visit would cost $200 we didn't have. We can't keep going to the emergency room for everything, Caleb said, holding our feverish baby. It's costing us thousands. I know, but what choice do we have? That afternoon, Techno Solutions released their response, a carefully crafted statement that painted me as a disgruntled employee trying to profit from false accusations. The truth is, Miss Thompson was underperforming before her leave and would have been terminated regardless of her pregnancy status, their statement read. It was a lie, but a convincing one. Social media comments started shifting. Maybe she really was a bad employee. These women always cry discrimination when they get fired. She's just trying to get rich quick. By evening, I was questioning everything. Maybe I wasn't strong enough for this fight. Maybe I should just disappear and try to rebuild our lives quietly. But then Emma's fever broke, and watching her smile reminded me why this mattered. They're trying to destroy my reputation, I told Caleb. But they made one mistake. What's that? I have the emails, and I'm not giving up. The next day brought news that would change everything again. 8 months after filing our EEOC complaint, I was feeding Emma when Evelyn called with news that made me drop my phone. Aubrey, you're not going to believe this. The House Subcommittee on Women's Rights wants you to testify at a hearing about pregnancy discrimination in the workplace. Congress? Like actual Congress? Next month in Washington, D.C. They've been following your case since the EEOC investigation began. They want to use it as an example of why current laws need to be strengthened. My head was spinning. 8 months ago, I was a new mom whose career had been destroyed. Now Congress wanted me to testify about workplace rights. What would I have to do? Tell your story. Show them the emails. Explain how this discrimination affects families. It's a huge opportunity to create real change. The timing was actually perfect. The EEOC had just completed their investigation and found reasonable cause to believe discrimination had occurred. They'd issued my right to sue letter, and we were preparing for federal court. The congressional hearing will strengthen our court case, Evelyn explained. Public pressure from a federal hearing often pushes companies towards settlement. Caleb was supportive but worried. Are you ready for that level of scrutiny? National television, political questions? But when I looked at Emma, now crawling and babbling constantly, I knew what I had to do. If testifying could prevent other mothers from facing discrimination, I had to try. The hearing is being covered by C-SPAN and all major networks, Evelyn warned. This will be much bigger than the local news coverage. But I was ready. After 8 months of legal battles and media attention, I'd found my voice. The week before my congressional testimony was a whirlwind of preparation. Evelyn flew in from Chicago to help me prepare, and Lexi spent hours helping me organize my thoughts. Remember, Evelyn coached me, you're not just telling your story. You're representing thousands of women who faced similar discrimination, but were too scared to speak up. We practiced for hours. Questions about the timeline, the emails, the impact on my family, how to stay calm under pressure, how to speak clearly, how to make complex legal issues understandable. What's the most important point you want to make? Lexi asked during a practice session. That this isn't just about me. It's about creating a workplace where women don't have to choose between having a family and having a career. Meanwhile, Techno Solutions was imploding. According to news reports, 3 executives had been placed on administrative leave. Their stock price had dropped 30%. 2 major clients had canceled contracts, citing reputational concerns. Trent, my former boss, had been fired. Meredith from HR was reassigned to other duties, corporate speak for demoted. Wednesday brought shocking news. Techno Solutions CEO resigned to pursue other opportunities. They're in full damage control mode, Danny told me. Everyone's running scared. But Thursday's news was the biggest yet. The Securities and Exchange Commission announced they were investigating whether Techno Solutions had properly disclosed the risks of their discriminatory practices to shareholders. My little employment case had become a federal investigation spanning multiple agencies. As Caleb and I packed for Washington, D.C., I couldn't help but think about how much had changed in just 1 month. 4 weeks ago, they'd fired me, thinking I'd disappear quietly. Now I was about to testify before Congress about their illegal practices. The hearing room was packed with reporters, cameras, and congressional staff. I sat at a long table facing 20 members of the House Subcommittee on Women's Rights, trying to keep my hands from shaking and my voice steady. Finding childcare for this trip had been a nightmare. We couldn't afford to bring a nanny, and I was still breastfeeding Emma every 3 hours. My mother-in-law had flown in to help, but Emma had been screaming for 2 hours before the hearing, refusing the bottle. "Miss Thompson," the chairwoman began, "thank you for being here today. Please tell us in your own words what happened to you at Techno Solutions." For the next 20 minutes, I told my story, occasionally pausing when my milk let down from hearing a baby cry in the gallery. The stress and exhaustion were overwhelming, but I pushed through. "These emails show a clear pattern of discrimination," I said, holding up printed copies. "But what's worse is that this affects entire families. I've been dealing with postpartum depression, financial crisis, and the stress of legal battles while trying to care for a newborn." Representative Martinez from California asked the toughest question. "Ms. Thompson, what would you say to critics who argue that new mothers can't handle high-pressure jobs?" "I'd say that's exactly the kind of thinking that led to my discrimination," I replied. "Yes, having a baby changes your life, but it doesn't make you less intelligent, less capable, or less valuable. Companies need to support working parents, not push them out." During a brief recess, I had to pump milk in a small office, feeling the irony of fighting for workplace lactation rights while struggling to find a private space in the Capitol building. The hearing ended with a standing ovation, but I was barely holding it together. Emma was screaming when I got back to the hotel, and I broke down crying from exhaustion. "You did amazing," Caleb said, trying to comfort both Emma and me, "but we need to talk about getting you more help when we get home." The next morning brought news that would make all the struggle worth it. The video of my testimony went viral immediately. Within hours, "Aubrey testifies" was trending on social media. News outlets played clips on repeat. The standing ovation became a meme. But the real impact came the next day when Representative Martinez announced new legislation, the Aubrey Thompson Pregnancy Discrimination Prevention Act. "Ms. Thompson's courage has shown us that our current laws aren't strong enough," she said at a press conference. "This bill will close loopholes and ensure that what happened to her never happens again." I was watching the press conference from our hotel room when my phone rang. It was Evelyn, and she was practically shouting with excitement. "Aubrey, Techno Solutions just called. They want to settle immediately." "For how much?" $750,000 plus your legal fees." I nearly dropped the phone. It was more money than I'd ever imagined, but more realistic than some cases I'd heard about. Enough to secure Emma's future, pay off our house, and give me time to figure out what came next. Plus, they want to implement new policies protecting pregnant workers, provide diversity training for all managers, and issue a public apology. It was the accountability I'd been fighting for. Real change that would protect other women. "There's one more thing," Evelyn added. "They want you to consult on developing their new parental leave policies. They're offering $50,000 for a 6-month consulting contract." The company that had fired me now wanted to pay me to help fix their discriminatory practices. "What do you think?" I asked. "I think," Evelyn said, "that you've won in every way possible." When we returned home from Washington, I found hundreds of letters waiting for me, but also a pile of overdue bills that made my stomach drop. Despite the media attention, we were still broke. The EEOC process didn't pay anything, and Evelyn worked on contingency. "The mortgage company called again," Caleb said quietly, holding Emma while I sorted through the mail. "We're 3 months behind." "What about your overtime?" "It's not enough. We need to talk about selling the house." That night, after Emma finally fell asleep, she'd been waking up every 2 hours since our DC trip, we had the fight that nearly broke us. "I'm getting a job at Target," I announced. "Night shift, while you're home with Emma." "You're exhausted, you're still dealing with postpartum depression, and you're in the middle of a federal case. You can't work retail right now." "Then what do you suggest?" "We're about to lose our house. Maybe we should take the next settlement offer, whatever it is." "So they win? So all the women who contacted me just suffer in silence?" Caleb exploded. I don't care about other women right now. I care about my wife and my daughter having a roof over their heads. We didn't speak for 2 days. I slept in Emma's room, crying silently while she nursed at night. The stress was affecting my milk supply again, and Emma was constantly fussy. It was during this lowest point that the letters from other women became my lifeline. "Thank you for fighting for us," wrote Maria from Texas. "I was fired while on bed rest, but seeing your story gave me courage to contact a lawyer." "You saved my career," wrote Jennifer from Oregon. "My company was about to push me out after my pregnancy announcement, but after your story went viral, they completely changed their tune." One letter from a teenage girl in Ohio made me cry. "Miss Thompson, I'm only 16, but watching you fight back showed me that women don't have to accept unfair treatment. When I have kids someday, I'll know I can be a mom and still chase my dreams." The next morning, I swallowed my pride and called my parents for a loan. We needed $3,000 just to survive another month. "Of course, honey," my mom said immediately. "We believe in what you're doing." But I knew this couldn't continue forever. Something had to give soon. 6 months after that devastating email, I stood in the offices of the Emma Foundation, our newly established nonprofit. The settlement money from Techno Solutions had funded our startup costs, and donations were pouring in from supporters across the country. "We have 17 new cases this week," said Rachel, our intake coordinator. "Women from everywhere, tech companies, law firms, hospitals, schools. The problem is bigger than anyone realized." Our first victory came quickly. A marketing company in Denver settled a discrimination case for $800,000 after we provided legal support to the victim. Word was spreading. Pregnancy discrimination had consequences now. Aubrey, Evelyn called from her new role as our legal director. "Congress just passed the Pregnancy Discrimination Prevention Act. It's officially law." The bill that bore my name was now federal law, strengthening protections for pregnant workers and closing the loopholes that companies like Techno Solutions had exploited. But the best news came from an unexpected source. "Mrs. Thompson?" The caller was nervous, young-sounding. "This is Brad, the guy who took your position at Techno Solutions." I tensed up. This was the man who'd been hired to replace me. "I wanted to apologize," he continued. "I had no idea how they'd treated you. When I found out, I quit. I couldn't work for a company that would do that to someone." "You quit?" "I started my own consulting firm, and I want to donate my first year's profits to the Emma Foundation." After the call, I sat in my office thinking about how much had changed. Techno Solutions had lost 3 major contracts and was still struggling to rebuild their reputation. Trent was unemployed and facing personal lawsuits. The entire tech industry was reevaluating their pregnancy policies. But more importantly, women were fighting back. Our foundation was helping dozens of discrimination victims every month. The conversation about workplace equality was finally happening. Emma was crawling now, pulling herself up on furniture and babbling constantly. She had no idea that her birth had sparked a national movement, but she would grow up in a better world because of it. 1 year after my firing, I received an invitation that brought everything full circle. Harvard Business School wanted me to speak at their annual conference on workplace equality. "Miss Thompson," the dean explained over the phone, "your case has become required reading in our business ethics courses. We'd like you to address our students about the real-world impact of discrimination." Standing in that lecture hall, looking at 200 future business leaders, I felt the weight of responsibility. "A year ago, I thought my career was over," I told them. "I'd been fired while recovering from childbirth, and I felt powerless. But I learned something important. One person with courage and evidence can change everything." During the Q&A, a young woman raised her hand. "Miss Thompson, how do we make sure this never happens again?" "By remembering that behind every policy decision is a human being. Behind every budget cut is a family. When you're in positions of power someday, remember that your choices have consequences." After the speech, dozens of students approached me with their own stories and ideas for change. The next generation was listening. But the most meaningful moment came when a pregnant student thanked me. "I'm graduating next month and starting at a consulting firm," she said. "A year ago, I was terrified about how my pregnancy would affect my career. Now I know my rights, and I know there are people fighting for women like us. Flying home that night, I reflected on the journey. What had started as a personal nightmare had become a movement that was protecting women across the country. The Emma Foundation was thriving, Congress had strengthened discrimination laws, and companies were finally taking pregnancy rights seriously. But there was still more work to do. 2 years after my firing, I got a call that brought everything full circle. Miss Thompson, this is Susan Chen, the new CEO of Techno Solutions. I'd like to invite you to speak at our company retreat about workplace inclusion. I almost laughed. The company that had fired me now wanted me to train their employees about discrimination. Why? I asked. Because we need to do better. Our reputation still hasn't recovered from what happened to you. Our employees need to understand why inclusion matters, not just legally, but morally. The speaking fee they offered was substantial, but that wasn't why I said yes. I said yes because change requires forgiveness, and forgiveness requires facing the past. Standing in Techno Solutions' main conference room, 2 weeks later, addressing the same executives who had once called me dead weight, felt surreal. 2 years ago, this company made a decision that changed my life, I began. They fired me while I was recovering from childbirth, thinking I would disappear quietly. They were wrong. I told them about the impact of their discrimination, not just on me, but on my family, my mental health, and my faith in the workplace. I showed them the emails that had revealed their bias, and watched as current employees looked uncomfortable. But I'm not here for revenge, I continued. I'm here because this company has a chance to be a leader in workplace equality. You can show other businesses that change is possible. During the break, a young woman approached me. She was obviously pregnant, probably about 6 months along. Miss Thompson, I wanted to thank you. I'm the first woman to have a baby here since you fought back. Because of you, I know my job is protected. After my presentation, Susan Chen pulled me aside. Aubrey, I have a proposition for you. Would you consider joining our board of directors? We need someone with your perspective to guide our policies. I stared at Susan in disbelief. You want me to join the board of the company that fired me? I want you to help us become the company we should have been all along, she replied. Your foundation has shown us what real change looks like. We need that expertise. The board position would pay well and give me influence over corporate policy at a major tech company. But more importantly, it would let me implement the changes I'd been advocating for. I need to think about it, I told her. That evening, Caleb and I discussed it over dinner while Emma played with her toys. It feels weird, I admitted, working for the people who hurt us. Or, Caleb said, it's the perfect way to make sure they never hurt anyone else. I called Evelyn for legal advice and Lexi for perspective. Both thought it was a brilliant opportunity. Think about it, Lexi said. You'd be the first discrimination victim to join the board of the company that discriminated against her. It would send a powerful message about accountability and change. But the conversation that convinced me came from an unexpected source. Danny called that night with news. Aubrey, I just got hired as Techno Solutions' new Director of Diversity and Inclusion. If you join the board, we could really transform this place. The idea of working with Danny to create systemic change was appealing. We both understood what had gone wrong before, and we both had ideas for fixing it. What about the foundation? I asked. The foundation will keep running, Evelyn assured me. But imagine having a board seat at a major corporation. You could influence policies that affect thousands of employees. That night, I made my decision. The next morning, I called Susan Chen and accepted the position. My first board meeting was surreal. Sitting around the same conference table where executives had once plotted to fire me, I was now helping make company policy. Our first priority is implementing comprehensive parental leave, I said during the policy discussion. Not just for mothers, but for fathers and adoptive parents too. That's expensive, noted the CFO. Not as expensive as discrimination lawsuits and federal investigations, I replied pointedly. Good policies are investments in our workforce. Over the next 6 months, Danny and I worked together to overhaul Techno Solutions culture. We implemented unconscious bias training, created employee resource groups, and established clear procedures for reporting discrimination. The changes were working. Employee satisfaction scores improved dramatically. We were attracting top talent again. And most importantly, women felt safe to start families without fear of retaliation. But the real test came when our first employee since my firing announced her pregnancy. Jennifer was a brilliant software engineer who'd been with the company for 3 years. When she told her manager about her pregnancy, his immediate response was to congratulate her and ask how the company could support her transition to parenthood. "It's amazing," Jennifer told me after her announcement. "3 years ago, I would have been terrified to tell them. Now they're asking how they can help." That conversation reminded me why I'd accepted the board position. Change wasn't just about policies on paper. It was about transforming workplace culture so that no woman would ever face what I'd faced. But there was one more surprise waiting for me. The call came on a Tuesday morning from someone I'd never expected to hear from again. "Mrs. Thompson? This is Meredith from, formerly from HR. I wondered if we could talk." Meredith wanted to meet at a coffee shop downtown, away from the office. When I arrived, she looked nervous and older than I remembered. "Thank you for agreeing to see me," she said. "I know I'm probably the last person you want to talk to." She was right. Meredith had sent that devastating email, had processed my termination, had been part of the system that tried to destroy my career. "I wanted to apologize," she continued. "What we did to you was wrong. I was wrong." "Why now?" I asked. "Because watching you transform this company has made me realize how much damage we caused. Not just to you, but to dozens of women over the years." Meredith explained that she'd been following orders from executives, implementing policies she knew were discriminatory because she was afraid of losing her own job. "I was a coward," she said. "I should have stood up for you, for all the women we pushed out. Instead, I was part of the problem." "What do you want from me?" I asked. "I want to help fix it. I'm starting a consulting firm to help companies implement fair hiring practices. I want to use my experience, including my mistakes, to prevent other women from going through what you did." It was an unexpected turn. The woman who had fired me now wanted to become an advocate for workplace equality. "I understand if you can't forgive me," Meredith said, "but I hope you'll let me try to make things right." Looking at her across the table, I saw genuine remorse and a desire to change. Forgiveness didn't mean forgetting, but it could mean moving forward. "Send me your business plan," I said. "The Emma Foundation might be interested in partnering with you." The smile of relief on her face reminded me that sometimes the people who hurt us can become the strongest advocates for change. 2 years after my firing, Lexi called with news that would bring our story to an even wider audience. "Netflix wants to make a documentary about your case," she said. "They've been following the story since your congressional testimony, and they think it could have major social impact." About me? About the broader issue of pregnancy discrimination, using your case as the central story. They want to interview you, Danny, Evelyn, even some of the women who've been helped by the foundation. The documentary project took 18 months to complete. Cameras followed me as I worked with the Emma Foundation, interviewed dozens of discrimination victims, and documented the changes happening at companies across the country. The film, titled Fighting Back: The Aubrey Thompson Story, premiered 2.5 years back after that first news article. Netflix had invested heavily in promotion, and the documentary was featured prominently on their platform. The most powerful moment in the film was an interview with Emma, now a bright 4-year-old. "What does Mommy do at work?" the interviewer asked her. "Mommy helps other mommies," Emma replied seriously. "She makes sure they don't get in trouble for having babies." The documentary sparked a new wave of conversations about workplace equality. Companies across the country reached out to the Emma Foundation for training. Law schools started offering courses on pregnancy discrimination. But the most meaningful response came from the thousands of women who shared their own stories after watching the film. "Thank you for showing us that fighting back is possible," wrote one viewer. "I just filed a complaint against my employer, and I'm not scared anymore." The girl who'd been born into a discrimination scandal was now 4 years old, and her birth story was inspiring women worldwide. The invitation arrived on official White House letterhead, and I had to read it 3 times to believe it was real. The president requests the honor of your presence at a ceremony recognizing champions of workplace equality. I was being honored at the White House for my advocacy work. The little girl from Ohio who'd been fired while on maternity leave was now being recognized by the President of the United States. Standing in the East Room of the White House, holding Emma's hand while she marveled at the fancy decorations, felt like a dream. Today, we honor individuals who've made extraordinary contributions to workplace equality, the President said during the ceremony. Aubrey Thompson turned a personal injustice into a national movement that has protected thousands of women. After receiving the award, I was interviewed by the White House press corps. Miss Thompson, what would you say to other women facing discrimination? I'd say that your voice matters, your story matters, and you're not alone. There are people and organizations ready to help you fight back. What's next for the Emma Foundation? We're expanding internationally. Pregnancy discrimination isn't just an American problem. Women around the world face similar challenges. We want to share the tools and strategies that have worked here. But the question that touched me most came from a young reporter. Miss Thompson, what do you hope your daughter learns from your experience? I looked down at Emma, who was tugging on my dress and whispering about the fancy chandelier. I hope she learns that when something is wrong, you speak up. I hope she learns that one person can make a difference. And I hope she grows up in a world where the fights I had to fight are no longer necessary. That evening, as we flew home from Washington, Emma fell asleep in my lap. Looking at her peaceful face, I thought about the future she would inherit. A future where pregnancy discrimination was rare instead of common. Where women didn't have to choose between careers and families, where speaking up against injustice was celebrated instead of punished. 5 years after my firing, I received an email that brought tears to my eyes. It was from a young woman named Sarah, a recent law school graduate. Miss Thompson, she wrote, I wanted you to know that your case inspired me to become a civil rights lawyer. I'm starting my career at a firm that specializes in employment discrimination, and I hope to help women the way you were helped. Sarah wasn't alone. Over the past 5 years, dozens of young people had contacted me to say that my story had influenced their career choices. Future lawyers, HR professionals, journalists, and business leaders who were committed to workplace equality. The Emma Foundation was now operating in 12 states and had helped over 3,000 women fight discrimination. We'd won settlements totaling more than $50 million and had trained employees at hundreds of companies. But the statistics that made me proudest were the ones we couldn't measure. The women who didn't face discrimination because companies had changed their policies. The mothers who felt safe starting families because of stronger legal protections. The young girls who grew up believing they could have both careers and children. Techno Solutions had become a model for workplace inclusion. Under Danny's leadership, their diversity programs were winning national awards. The company that had once discriminated against pregnant women was now actively recruiting working mothers. It's incredible, Danny told me during our monthly board meeting. We went from having one of the worst reputations for women's issues to being recognized as an industry leader. But perhaps the most meaningful change was personal. Emma was now 5 years old, bright and curious, and completely unaware that her birth had sparked a national movement. Mommy, she asked one day while I was working on foundation business, why do you help other mommies? Because everyone deserves to be treated fairly, I explained, and sometimes we have to fight for what's right. Will I have to fight too when I grow up? I hugged her tight. I hope not, baby. I hope not. The invitation to speak at Techno Solutions' annual company meeting felt like the ultimate full-circle moment. 5 years after they'd fired me, they wanted me to address all their employees about the importance of workplace inclusion. Standing on the same stage where company executives had once announced my termination, I looked out at an audience that included many of the people who had witnessed my firing. 5 years ago, this company made a decision that changed my life, I began. They fired me while I was on maternity leave, thinking that would be the end of the story. But sometimes, the end of one story is the beginning of another. I told them about the journey from that devastating email to this moment. The legal battle, the congressional testimony, the foundation, the international work, the thousands of women who'd been helped, and the laws that had been changed. But the most important change, I continued, happened right here. This company chose to confront its mistakes, to implement real reforms, and to become a leader in workplace equality. That takes courage. During the Q&A, a young employee asked, "Miss Thompson, do you ever regret fighting back instead of just taking a settlement and moving on?" "Never," I said without hesitation. Fighting back was the best decision I ever made. Not because of the money or the recognition, but because it led to real change that's protecting other women. After the presentation, Susan Chen, the CEO, made an announcement that surprised everyone. "Today, we're establishing the Aubrey Thompson Fellowship for Workplace Equality," she said. "This annual program will fund research and advocacy work to continue advancing women's rights in the workplace." As the applause filled the auditorium, I thought about the scared new mother who'd received that discriminatory email 5 years ago. She never could have imagined that her worst day would lead to her greatest purpose. Today marks the 6th anniversary of that email that changed my life. Emma is now 6 years old, starting 1st grade, and fascinated by the idea that her mommy is in a movie, the Netflix documentary, and met the president. The Emma Foundation has grown beyond anything I could have imagined. We're operating in 25 states and 3 countries. We've helped over 10,000 women, and we've trained employees at more than 1,000 companies. But the real measure of our success isn't in numbers, it's in the stories. Like Maria, who kept her job during her pregnancy because her company was afraid of another Aubrey Thompson situation. Like Jennifer, who started her own tech company with family-friendly policies from day one. Like the countless women who've told me they felt empowered to speak up because they knew someone would listen. The legal changes have been substantial too. The Pregnancy Discrimination Prevention Act has been strengthened twice since its initial passage. Companies now face real consequences for discriminatory practices. And the conversation about workplace equality has moved from whispers to headlines. "Mommy," Emma asked me this morning, "tell me again about when I was a baby and you were brave." So I told her the story. How her birth led to an email that revealed a company's bias, how that email sparked a legal battle, how that battle became a movement, and how that movement changed laws and policies across the country. "Will other mommies be safe now?" she asked. "Safer than before," I told her. "But there's still work to do." As I tucked Emma into bed that night, I thought about the future she'll inherit. It won't be perfect. Discrimination still exists, and the fight for equality continues. But it's a world where women know their rights, where speaking up is supported, and where one person's courage can create lasting change. The company that tried to silence me ended up amplifying my voice to the world. The discrimination that was meant to end my career became the foundation of my life's work. Sometimes the worst thing that happens to you becomes the best thing you ever do. And that's a lesson worth sharing. They fired me while I was on maternity leave, but what happened next made national news.